This is Stephen Howard, Advocacy Director with In Defense of Christians, and I want to welcome everyone who's watching to our roundtable discussion today on Pope Francis' visit to Iraq. We are incredibly honored to have a distinguished panel of experts who are going to be discussing the significance of this trip to Iraqi Christians, the messages it'll be sending on the ground, as well as how we as the US can actually respond to the visit in a post-genocide context. And so there's been a lot written about what's been going on in Iraq in light of the papal visit. We're looking forward to getting into that, but we're really looking at addressing these issues both from, what does this look like for the Christian community? What does this look like from a security perspective, from a humanitarian perspective? So we're very excited. And before I actually formally introduce our entire panel of experts, I did want to just invite one of the people we have on our roundtable here is a bishop. We have Mar Abba Royel, who's bishop with the Assyrian Church of the East, specifically in the Diocese of California. And I wanted to invite him just to offer up a prayer before we go ahead and get started today.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen, and greetings to all of my fellow panelists and to all of our viewers this morning. Let us begin with a prayer from the liturgy of the Assyrian Church of the East for the season of Lent. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, forever. Amen. You, O Christ, the true light of all lights, who feeds lights from your light, and who dwells in the excellent light which no Son of Man has seen nor can approach. We beseech and we ask you, even we who are weak and sinful, to enlighten the darkness of our minds by the brightness of your unspeakable light, so that the lamps of our souls, being enlightened with the oil of mercy and pity, we may also be enlightened with the light of your light, which enlightens all. And may we rejoice in the joy of your countenance, which delights all. And may we desire to meet you at your manifestation, which renews all creatures. O you who did create the light in your loving kindness, and who does order the darkness in your wisdom, and in the knowledge of your Godhead, which cannot be fathomed by spiritual ones, and by those who are corporeal, O Lord of all, Father and Son and Holy Spirit, forever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Bishop. And everyone, we're just incredibly thrilled to get going here. Obviously, Pope Francis is undertaking this visit to Iraq at a very sensitive time. It's been some years since the ISIS genocide, and the community is still very much struggling to recover. I had the opportunity to put an article in The Hill just this morning focusing on the fact that this is a community that is in need of hope, and that while the US has done some good in response to the genocide that was committed on a wide bipartisan basis. And so that's why we're happy to have Congressman Fortenberry join us when he does, to attest to that good work that we've seen from people such as Vice President Pence in the previous administration, Congressman Fortenberry, Congresswoman Anna Eshoo, and so many others. And we've been happy to see the US stand so strongly with survivors of this genocide. And our hope is that this visit from Pope Francis will instill and will really re-energize these efforts, so that we as Christians across the world, but also as the US, can really develop a long-term strategy to support Christians, Yazidis, and so many of these other groups who have survived the ISIS genocide. So with that being said, I know the Congressman is a few minutes late, and so we will let him, we'll let him hop on the call when he does. And so we'll just go ahead and get started with our panel discussion. And so I'll introduce our panelists now. And as I've already mentioned, one of our panelists is Mar Abba Royel, who's Bishop of the Assyrian Church of the East. He's also a board member of IDC, so we're very honored to have him. And we also have Ranna Abro with the Shlama Foundation, a good friend of ours whose organization is doing good work in Iraq on the ground. We also have Joe Snell, who's editor of the Assyrian Journal and a writer with Al Monitor. We have Dr. Elie Abouaoun with U.S. Institute of Peace, who's just had an article come out this week about what this papal visit can mean for Christians in Iraq. And then we also have Karmella Borashan with the Assyrian Aid Society, another organization who has done great work in Iraq. And so we couldn't be more honored to have everyone. And so just to really kick things off here, Very simple question, but the title of the visit, "You Are All Brothers." What message do you all see this theme as sending to Iraqis? What do you all see the Pope is trying to accomplish with this visit? So I'll turn it over to Mar Awa first.
Well, thank you very much, Stephen. It's a joy and an honor to be with all of you this morning. As you mentioned, the theme of the papal visit is "You Are All Brothers," and the official logo that came out on the Vatican website, which I was checking the other day, has that theme written in Arabic, in Syriac, or the liturgical language of the churches, the Christian churches in Iraq, and in Kurdish. And so I think that there is a very strong interreligious emphasis, if you will, on the visit of Pope Francis to the country, and with the intention of bringing together the various religious components and interreligious components, be they Muslim, Christian, Yazidi, etc. So I think the theme intends to be all-encompassing without respect of religion. Now, the other aspect of it, from what I have understood, is that the Pope intends to emphasize the fact that all Iraqis should be coming together under the umbrella of Iraqi, meaning that no matter what religion they belong to, they should first and foremost appreciate the fact that they are Iraqis, and that they should be able to work together to rebuild their country as Iraqis. So I think there's a very strong interreligious focus with the papal visit. And that's why, of course, it was published in the Vatican website in terms of the papal itinerary, that one of the main stops that the Pope would have would be with Ayatollah Sistani in southern Iraq. So there is a heavy interreligious emphasis, I think, and that's what the theme is actually trying to encompass.
Thank you very much, Mar Awa. I'll turn it over now to Joe Snell for his thoughts.
Yeah, first off, I just want to thank IDC for hosting this important panel. So I'm going to echo some of what was just said. The trip sends a few different messages to Iraqis. On the one hand, it establishes important interfaith dialogue. On the other, it encourages those on the ground or reminds them that they're not forgotten. Now, I listened to a BBC audio story the other day that started with, "Will the Pope's visit encourage Christians to return home?" And it's a similar headline to one I'm sure many in the audience today have seen in the past few weeks. The short answer is that I think it won't, at least not without being coupled with real change on the ground. So this is a song that the Syrians are used to hearing, encouragement that they're safe and they can return home, but there's no real action behind this word. So Kadmi did this in August when he met with Chaldean Catholic leaders and wrote the message, "My door is open to all Iraqis. We are serious about providing assistance to our Christian families and solving their problems." But the state has shown they're not very serious about solving the problems, and Christians can't wait for them to act. So this leaves them to build back up their own communities. We think of the Assyrian Aid Society's work and Shlama's work on the ground to build homes and bring solar energy. There's even an Assyrian security force, the Nineveh Plains protection units. When you look at displaced Christians returning home, they're primarily returning to areas under the MPU's control because they believe in the security provided by their own people. So going back to the initial question, which the Pope hoped to accomplish, I think he accomplishes something just by meeting with Sistani and visiting Ur and Najaf and Erbil and Mosul and Karakosh. The Pope represents peace and love and humanity, and it's a message that I think the country desperately needs right now. But I worry that idea that the visit is a message in itself or a step towards advocacy will overshadow some of the real work on the ground that needs to be accomplished. I believe it will also be important for the Pope not only to highlight some of the destruction that was done, but also to highlight some of the work that's being done inside these communities right now to rebuild themselves. So the story of Syrians is not only one of doom and gloom, as many people would have you try to believe. It's actually a story of persistence and inspiration. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you very much, Joe. That was a great way to help kick off the conversation after Mar Awa's excellent opening remarks. Let's transition over to Karmella now in California. Oh, can you kindly unmute yourself, Karmella?
Can you hear me?
Perfect.
First, I want to thank you in Defense of Christian for setting up this meeting and always being at the forefront of Christians and being their voice. It's an honor to be on this panel. What message is Pope Francis hoping to send to Iraqis? As you know, Assyrians are indigenous people of that region and have been there for more than 6,000 years. The first empire of Assyrians has built the infrastructure of current societies. The Assyrian community has deep historical roots as indigenous people in Iraq with a strong Christian faith. The Pope's visit reinforces the importance of maintaining this fabric in Iraq and preserving not only their Christian identity, but their deep-rooted ethnic identity. The Assyrians are dwindling down at an alarming rate due to fear of persecution that constantly looming over their heads. Their language, Aramaic, is dissipating as the Assyrian population is not supported. What should Pope hope to accomplish with this visit? To raise the awareness of the Assyrian plight, request security in the region, request province for Assyrians, Syriacs, Chaldeans, all the Christians. The safety and preservation of Assyrian Christian will promote a multi-ethnic and multi-religious Iraq. And with his visit and meeting with all these spiritual leaders, we're hoping that this will be accomplished. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karmella. Really appreciate it. Look forward to hearing more about your work later. I want to transition now over to Ranna in Michigan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, IDC. So I normally like to just speak freely, but I did prepare a response to this because, and it's pretty intense, but I really want to put it in perspective of how this feels, how this visit feels. So the first thing is to note is that Iraq is a baby. It was founded less than 90 years ago. Syria is only 75 years old. And many elders in our community have memories that are older than both of these countries. Most of the people who remain in our ancient lands currently live in Iraq and Syria after being pushed out of Turkey and Iran through ceaseless persecution. And our fate will be the same if we don't do something about it soon. The last remnants of the Aramaic language that Jesus spoke himself were discovered in Edessa on the border of Iraq and Turkey, and we are the only people in the world who have preserved a modern form of it in everyday speech. While we have been surrounded by people trying to erase our language, we are not just Christians, we are ancient Christians. We are ancient Assyrians and Babylonians. Iraq has some of the oldest historical artifacts on this entire planet. The Pope's trip includes visits to several ancient sites, including Ur and Nineveh, which Iraq finally conveniently cleaned up for him. These artifacts contain innumerable secrets to the past. Major universities and museums continue to make stunning discoveries to this day. In just the past couple years, we've heard brand new things that we didn't know in the past. Artifacts mean a lot to us. They're not only interesting displays for history buffs at museums. To us, these are historical evidence that provide proof of unbroken continuity that we existed in the past and continue to exist today. It is truly unfortunate that we have to hold on to these artifacts so desperately to prove that we exist, but that's a reflection of how the Middle East has treated us. ISIS members took hammers and knocked the hammers on Jesus's and Mary's, the Virgin Mary's faces. They knocked their hammers on the lamassus. And then Joe reminded me that this is the anniversary of the video that came out of them destroying the lamassus with sledgehammers. They took bulldozers and ran over our tombstones in the cemeteries. Our cemeteries are considered historical sites to us. They took books, including ancient manuscripts, and burned them. How should we interpret this? This is something we will never understand. And the worst part is that ISIS's ethnic erasure efforts are still being continued today, just more discreetly and peacefully.
Yeah.
This is a disgrace to academia, to all human knowledge. We are a piece of that history. What kind of people make the choice for their nation to not have any history? You are all brothers is a hopeful statement, but it is coated in a painful shell. As Christians, we always have hope. We hope that the Pope's visit truly inspires peace and reconciliation, but it's going to take many more serious initiatives if Iraq really wants to exist as a true nation. In my family, brothers argue and make up. Brothers means family, and Iraqis have a long path ahead before such a bold statement can be trusted.
Well said, Ranna. Thank you. And what I'm going to actually do now is, my understanding is that the congressman is on the call. And so I will allow Sarah. There he is. Okay. Congressman, well, it's my pleasure then. I'll go ahead and introduce Congressman Jeff Fortenberry of Nebraska, who's been one of the leading bipartisan champions, not only for genocide recognition, but for genocide response in the US Congress. And he's fought years and years, for these issues. He has a community of Yazidi Americans in his congressional district that he fights tirelessly for. And he's put and expended so much of his time, energy, and resources, and his staff, which I'm sure that Mina and Drew can attest to advocating for genocide recognition and response in Iraq, and support for Christians, Yazidis, and other religious minorities. So Congressman Fortenberry, we're honored that you can join us, and we look forward to hearing from you right now.
Well, you're kind and generous, Stephen, perhaps too much so, and I apologize. I am on a jet bridge getting ready to get on the plane where the door is closing momentarily. We had a serious shift in congressional schedules late last night, so I'm sorry for the indignity of this. I hope you can hear me okay, but I still wanted to come on and first of all, thank Independence Christian, really the singular platform worldwide, which brings focused attention on the plight of religious minorities in the Middle East and worldwide. But it's deeper than as horrible and twisted and dark as what has happened to the Christian community and the Yazidi community and certain Muslim minority communities in the Middle East and throughout the world. It is a deeper proposition that you're about. And of course, this is the most emergency need for mankind to get its mind around, that unless we have an architecture in the 21st century that's focused on the singular proposition, human dignity, that every person matters, and there is a sacred space of conscience in each person that allows them the possibility to reach for God through reasoned religion and faith tradition. And the Christians of the Middle East have as much right to be there as anyone else. These ancient traditions once helped form the mosaic of plurality there. It is always been under stress and difficulty, but that's part of the mission, as we all know. But to be targeted for experimentation, to be non-recognized, treated as second class, this isn't just a matter of rights for Christians in the Middle East and others. It is a matter of human dignity. It is essential to the principles of civilization itself. And if there ever is to be healthy nationalism in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, throughout the entire region, then this ideal of respecting the rights and dignity of each person. Now, to make that practical, we had to fight off the dark, twisted threat of ISIS. We continue, I think the previous speaker was referencing that, to guard against the inability of systems, if you will, to protect the innocent and vulnerable. We in the United States, we tried to basically provide an airlift of funds and resources. The deeper issue, though, is security. That how do I propose integrating Iraqi Christians and Yazidis into regularized military, Iraqi security forces with more autonomy to help protect themselves. So we've got a lot of work to do, but without your organization continuing to raise consciousness worldwide on this issue, I'm afraid it would just be another news story, and then we'd lurch to something else. So thank you for everybody's commitment. Please keep going. I think, frankly, the Pope's visit is nothing short of miraculous. I'm sorry, I keep having to look to see if the doors can be closed on the plane. The Pope's visit is nothing short of miraculous. I am trying as best I can in the national news to elevate this, because I don't want it to be an overlooked story. An old man in the midst of the pandemic is going at the behest of Muslim leader invitation to one of the most troubled parts of the world, while Iranian-backed militias are firing rockets at U.S. troops, the residual of U.S. troops here. Nothing short of miraculous. I'm hopeful that perhaps this could be a turning point for modern Iraq that actually reaches back to its past, where there was much more, where there was a mosaic, a tapestry of religious pluralism, including, by the way, an ancient Jewish community, which is all gone now. And then sends a signal to, again, the broader worldwide community that this place for human dignity, we're all brothers, has to be the reigning paradigm of the 21st century, or we will lose the fundamentals of civilization itself. In the moment, it seems tough and difficult, if we can continue on this trajectory and have extraordinary, courageous people like those who are hosting the Pope in Iraq continue to speak and be forward-leaning. And in fact, one Christian leader in the Middle East said to me, the persecution has now made us into a mission church. Beautiful. The other thing that was said to me by Muslim leaders themselves at the highest level, it would be disastrous for us to lose the Christian population, which has always served as a leaven, if you will, in providing services, particularly medicine and education, to people of all faiths. And of course, that's completely consistent with who we are as Christians. So this is essential for the well-being of all people. So I'm going to try. I have another national news media story, I think, next week coming out on the Pope's visit. We've already done 2. I don't want this to come and go without a proper amount of attention, because it, of course, is about stopping the persecution and then the bigger issues that point to how we are going to behave and live in the 21st century as a worldwide community. Because we have the capability to destroy one another, either through ideology or weaponry in an instant. And that's where we are. IDC, thank you so much for giving me this moment. I really apologize. This is very undignified, and you're such a dignified organization. But I didn't want to miss the moment to, again, appear with you guys. And thank you for your kind words, Stephen. I appreciate it. I'm going to have to go. Thank you. God bless you.
Safe travels, Congressman, and we are deeply honored that he joined us. And I know some of his staff is on the call now, especially people, again, like Mina and Drew. And I just want to really extend our deepest gratitude to Congressman Fortenberry and his entire team. Much of our greatest accomplishments as an organization have come with the leadership of Congressman Fortenberry. And we really would not be where we are. And truthfully, the U.S. response to the ISIS genocide would not be what it is without him and without his leadership. So I'll invite Dr. Abouaoun now to share some of his initial thoughts, perhaps even reacting to what the Congressman shared, but also just on the papal visit in general.
Yes, thank you very much. Well, obviously, a lot has been covered by the previous panelists, and I do concur with all what has been said. I would add a few things, though. The first one is that I think that the key message from this visit is a message of courage and defiance. And I guess that what the Congressman just mentioned about, the old age of the Pope and the pandemic and all of this is basically a sign of courage and defiance. But beyond this, the answer or the response that we've seen from the Vatican today following the rocket incident yesterday is also somehow defying. So I guess it carries a very powerful message of hope and courage. There's obviously the unity aspect. So the slogan or the theme of the visit is "You are all brothers." It was explained in depth that, it carries an interreligious, interfaith message, which again, I concur with, but I do also think, and this is my personal opinion, that it also carries a message to the Christians themselves about the importance of their own unity, especially in these difficult times. But beyond the hope, the courage, the unity that are very important ingredients for the future of the Christians in Iraq, I do hope personally that this visit will create a momentum to tackle or to address more concrete issues, more tangible issues that I can probably go over later during the conversation. But my hope is that this visit will not only consist of generic, messages of moral nature, but it goes beyond this in addressing very specific concerns of the Christians and the other minorities in Iraq. Thank you.
That's very well said, Dr. Abouaoun. And I'm excited now to kind of go a little bit deeper into some of these issues now. And I wanted to actually bring Marawa back into the conversation, because I know that you've been involved in ecumenical dialogue with the Vatican for a while. And I'm really interested, especially as someone who belongs to a different Christian tradition, what you think the Pope's visit is going to mean for ecumenical dialogue between Catholics, Orthodox, and the Church of the East, Protestants, in Iraq.
Right. Well, thank you, Stephen. Yes, I think we've been speaking about the interreligious or interfaith aspect. So let's sort of come back more closer to home. Obviously, the visit of the Pope has been long awaited by all of the Christians in Iraq. And in fact, I remember well that the late Pope John Paul II had actually announced and expressed his wish to and desire to visit Iraq as early on as the year 2000, which was the Jubilee year of Christianity. And there were many celebrations in Rome and whatnot. And the Pope at that time had expressed his desire to conduct a pilgrimage to Ur, to the land of Abraham. And obviously, we know that Abraham is our common father in faith. And so, coming back to the ecumenical aspect of the Pope's visit, I think, and I'm going to be very open about this as the ecumenical officer of the Assyrian Church of the East, I would have really loved to see a stronger ecumenical, meaning inter-church perspective expressed by the papal visit. So there is this all-encompassing theme, you are all brothers, and that's supposed to bring everyone together, irrespective of faith, as Iraqis, in order to come back and build their country together. But the fact remains that Christianity has as one of its main cradles, especially in the Middle East, certainly in Mesopotamia, is Iraq. It's not only the cradle of civilization, but it's also the cradle of Christianity in all of Mesopotamia. It goes back to the apostolic times when Mar'ade and Marmari had come to Mesopotamia 3 years after our Lord's ascension and had preached the gospel. So I really would have liked to have seen a greater Christian emphasis on, or interchurch, interdialogue within the church's emphasis with the papal visit. So as of yet, we have no information about the Pope meeting in any planned ecumenical events with the heads of churches. So our Patriarch, His Holiness Margivargis III, will be there in Arbil for the papal mass, I believe, which will take place on Sunday, March 7th. But we would have hoped for a more formal meeting with His Holiness the Patriarch, seeing that the historical ecclesiastical primate of Iraq is the Patriarch of Seleucia Ctesiphon, who's the Patriarch of the Assyrian Church of the East. And that's a historical fact. So that would have been a very important and very meaningful event for the Vatican to have planned, as well as a roundtable discussion with the Pope and the heads of churches which are present in Iraq and the representatives of the various Christian denominations sitting together in a sort of roundtable format and discussing and sharing what the plight of the Christian communities is. So unfortunately, none of that has been done. It may happen sort of spontaneously, we don't know, but at least it's not in the published itinerary of the Pope, which the Vatican has released. So I really would have loved to have seen more of an emphasis on that. Giving more attention to the plight of the Christian communities, the various Christian communities, is very important, because it was accented by the panelists before me that the refugee status, the displacement status really has not been resolved in many cases. And so how do we help the Christians? How does one help the Christians to stay in their ancient homeland? Security obviously is one of the major components of that. So I really would have liked to seen that addressed. And also there's, I think, and I'm going to be a bit biased here, if you forgive me, there is a very giant elephant in the room that oftentimes in various forums we don't like to discuss. And that is the issue, and it was mentioned by my co-panelists, Karmella and Joe, the reality of the indigenous people of Iraq. So every nation gives respect or gives recognition to the indigenous people who at that point are no more the, not necessarily dominant, but the majority populace, if you will. No one speaks about the fact that the Assyrians are the indigenous people of Iraq. The congressman mentioned civilization. Okay, Iraq is the cradle of civilization. And if we go back to the history books, we'll see what has been contributed by the Assyrian, later the Babylonians as well. in terms of this this legacy of civilization to all of humanity. So that's not being addressed. The Iraqi government definitely has not addressed it for these past almost 80 years and is not doing so today. So where is the status of the indigenous people? And when I say Assyrians, of course, I don't exclude the Chaldeans and the Syriacs. I include them under that all-encompassing umbrella. So these are 3 points that I would have really have loved to seen in the papal visit. And again, it's a very historic visit. It's a short time. The Pope will be there for only 4 or 5 days. There's a lot to do historically within that visit. But what are the chances that another reigning pontiff will visit Iraq anytime soon, which probably is very slim.
Mm-hmm.
So these are just some perspectives I'm throwing out there in terms. But yes, you're right, Stephen. Our church does have a very robust ecumenical dialogue with the Roman Catholic Church, and we appreciate that very well. But we would have liked to seen a more ecumenical perspective displayed in the papal itinerary.
Thank you very much, Marawa. We really appreciate that.
Thank you.
And for you sharing those just your experiences with dialogue over the years, as well as putting them in the context of this visit. I think it's good to have an honest conversation about these things. And it perfectly segues into the question I have for Joe, which is that, you're the editor of the Assyrian Journal. You cover issues, political issues, social issues, cultural issues for the Assyrian community. But there's also an imminent threat when we look at Iraqi Christians, Assyrians, Chaldeans, Syriacs, that they may just leave the country. This is a community that may relocate entirely into diaspora, possibly in our lifetimes. How imminent is that threat? And how are you making a difference in helping preserve this identity as the community is trending into diaspora?
Yeah, well, to start, I think that the community will never entirely leave the country, but numbers are certainly decreasing. That's for a number of factors. I've covered for Al Monitor the Assyrian communities caught in the crossfire of Turkish bombings going after the PKK in northern Iraq. And even Assyrians from displaced camps who are trying to return home are met with land grab issues. And this is actually a huge problem, especially in the Nineveh Plains. So imagine fleeing your home and then trying to return a few years later and someone else is living there. There's no real bureaucratic help in the KRG. In fact, in one of the cases I'm covering, a home that was taken now belongs to a Kurdish police officer that's charged with the very security that these communities are looking for when they're trying to return home. And then there's also the cultural heritage issue. I think Ranna mentioned it earlier. This heritage isn't just something nice to look at and store in a museum. It proves existence. So destroying it is a part of a campaign to wipe out that history. But as I mentioned before, there are real efforts to rebuild these communities. And I want to emphasize again that these efforts are largely being led by the communities on the ground, not the state. So the state will roll out the red carpet for the Pope, and rightfully so. It's a historic trip, and it brings an important interfaith dialogue. I hope the Pope can also see the other side of the coin behind the trip's production. So example of this is the site at Ur. It's the birthplace of Abraham, as we talked about before. It was a popular tourist destination in the 70s and 80s. But since then, it's been in really bad shape. It took a visit from the Pope to restore the site. So the imminent threat is not the community leaving entirely. I think more so it's about being forgotten by the state and international community, and also historically. So that leads into the second question about making a difference. So much reporting about Assyrians is only about death and destruction and despair. It only covers the community, I think, from one lens, and it's a pretty bleak lens, to be honest. And this was killing hope in the community. Imagine reading only negative headlines about the fate of your people every day. You can imagine it has an effect on your ability to believe in a better future. But there are so many positive initiatives going on that were often only discussed in Facebook posts and text messages and phone calls to family and friends. So to wrap it up briefly, I want to say that that's an important way to make a difference. Highlight the history and the culture, and also highlight the work of the people on the ground that are really making a difference in both the homeland and the diaspora.
That was, again, you guys really, this whole panel complements each other so well. So thank you, Joe. And when we're talking about people making a difference on the ground, I think that's a great segue to the Assyrian Aid Society. And so I wanted to invite Karmella to share really a bit more about her work, and that, you guys have been providing humanitarian assistance to Assyrian Christians for many years. Can you just share what the needs are of the community right now, and what would you say the Pope can do to offer encouragement?
Thank you, Stephen. And I'm going to be taking the risk of being redundant. But as you can see, the plight of Assyrians is so much that constant Assyrian humanitarian organizations are popping up rightfully to help our people. But the Assyrian Aid Society as a grassroots organization with its sister organization in Iraq have been established since 1991 after the Gulf War due to emerging persecution of Assyrian Christians. In 1991, Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq was one of the very first humanitarian organizations in the region, working and coordinating with the United Nations, which was just beginning their own local and international humanitarian work in Iraq. Post 2003, many Assyrian Christians fled the cities of central Iraq as they were persecuted by sectarian violence and targeted directly for their faith. These Assyrians fled to the north to their ancestral towns and villages, mainly Nineveh Plain. The Assyrian Aid Society has since been building, providing infrastructure to these areas. Yet the effective Ba'ath regime and sectarian violence continues to impoverish ancient and populated Assyrian towns throughout northern Iraq. Assyrian Aid Society of America is running by volunteers, with the exception of one employee. We have raised about $1 million every year, and 91 cents of a dollar has reached the grounds and was nominated for Nobel Peace Prize for all its efforts. We have covered educators' salaries, printed all the curriculums from first grade to 12th in Assyrian language, paid bus drivers' salaries to take children to schools, putting up street lights, building roads, building irrigation channels, building shops with collaboration with USAID. USAID has been very integral and helpful in many projects that they have helped us. Building houses, massive COVID relief package, food distribution, and helping with agricultural needs. Basically, building the infrastructure. Our sister organization, Assyrian Aid Society of Iraq, is at the forefront in the homeland and faces case after case of discrimination on a daily basis. Needy people knocking on our doors without jobs, inhabitants from north of Iraq pleading for help as their lands are destroyed by Turkish airstrikes or burned by neighbors, and continuous land grabs of our indigenous lands. Land grabbing, textbook alteration, removal of Assyrian names from historical books, lack of security, delay in salary payments are just few challenges they face on a daily basis. What can Hope do to offer encouragement to our community? By his visit, he reminds all Iraqis of all faith the significance of the ancient Assyrian Christian community and its importance to the mosaic fabric of Iraq. However, this visit will need to come with implementation of human rights, security, and structure for self-economic reliance. As the statement reads, when justice dies, civilization dies. And that has been our case in that region. He can promote and emphasize on the security of the region, which my colleagues mentioned it, specifically by enforcing or helping Nineveh Plain Protection Unit, acknowledging of Assyrian Christian rights, importance to maintain the mosaic of Iraqi society, importance of having ancient people in that region. This will maintain the fabric and mosaic of the country, having economic independence, as I mentioned, and most importantly, the security that is lacking in that region. These all in itself will encourage the Assyrian population. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karmella. Really appreciate that. We have some great points that I mentioned as well in the article that I put out today in the Hill, which is that USAID has done some really historic work in genocide response, almost $400 million for religious and ethnic minorities in a post-genocide context. And it's really important that Biden administration look at ways to institutionalize that aid and think big picture about it, because we know that genocide recovery doesn't happen in 2 or 3 years. There needs to be a long-term plan to really invest in Iraq's diversity. Some really good work USAID actually has been the new partnership initiative. And one of the organizations that they've partnered with that serves the Christian community is the Shlama Foundation. And so I wanted to invite Ranna to share a bit about their work with USAID, with the NPI, share about projects of the Shlama Foundation, and just why it's so important and how really the work of their organization fits in with the Pope's visit.
Thank you. So for those who don't know, the new partnership initiative was a special opportunity that was created for smaller nonprofits and faith-based organizations to be able to gain access to grant opportunities. Previously, we were too small to gain access to these grants. Typically, you need millions of dollars and a big staff and enough employees to manage all the components of a grant. So this opportunity was really a special consideration on the part of the United States. And this is something we really truly hope that will continue long term. And since there's so many advocates in this meeting and American taxpayers, I think it's important that everybody's aware of this and how impactful it is. So basically, I'll call it the NPI, the New Partnership Initiative. It provides smaller amounts of funding to smaller organizations, and then USAID provides administrative support so that these organizations that might be lacking in the fancy administrative elements, they'll be able to manage these grants. And because of this, we were able to have our first grant from USAID, and it was to install solar power, bring solar power to the Nineveh Plains, basically. So this was the brainchild of actually an engineer who works for the big 3 auto companies in America. His name is Faiz Yono. He went to Iraq and he said, hey, did you know Iraq gets as much sunlight hours as California? Why haven't we thought of solar power? Because electricity is a major issue every day, and everyone who lives there is just used to it. It's always going to be interrupted no matter where you live. It might turn off randomly, and you can tell who's the foreigner because people there don't even flinch while we're like, oh my gosh, electricity's out. So this was really exciting for us. We were able to take 6 engineers. There are many, this is something a lot of people don't know, but there are many educated young people in Iraq without jobs. So there were these engineers that were all working odd jobs, not in engineering. And so they were extremely excited to work in their field, first of all, and to receive additional training in a specialized field. So through the grant, we were able to provide them with solar training, and now they are all certified solar engineers. And they can take that further after this grant is done at the end of the year. So far we have furnished 70 homes with solar power. 17 farms now have solar water pumps, and 3 villages in Bakr, Tescopa, and Bendawaya now have solar streetlights. And we post on our social media all the time, so you can see on Shlama like what it looks like. There's videos, and you could see everything that we're working on. So I just wanted to. Shlama does a whole bunch of other stuff. If you want to see every project that we've done, you can just go to shlama.org/projects, and you will see all the details that you can ever dream of. They're all listed, how much they cost, what we bought, everything is there. So I want to focus on a little bit of how much more meaningful electricity is than people think. It is a statement of independence. It is like Iraq is a country where everybody has previously relied on the government for every single thing. There weren't really many nonprofit organizations. Most of them are actually Westerners. So even the whole culture of volunteerism is kind of new because everybody relied on the government for everything. And the public servants were the soldiers and the churches. That's who people would go to as for public needs. So with electricity, we can change the whole economy. People can become self-reliant. We at Shlama, we want to promote entrepreneurship. We want freedom for people to be able to succeed if they want to. We want to remove all of these obstacles as much as possible. It is hard because Shlama is not a political organization. So, and we don't have those connections, but we do have partnerships and relationships with organizations like IDC and other API and other community organizations and journalists like Joe, where we communicate the obstacles that we encounter. And then we hope that, and the people here that are listening to this panel, we hope that those of you that have the access and the capability to influence change politically, that you can remove some of these obstacles for us, because all we want is some of these Western abilities that we have here to make the quality of life better there. And we don't want to push American culture on the beautiful culture we have there. We just want to take some of those great values like female empowerment, economic freedom, the ability to start a business if you want to, ownership of, being able to own things, like not the government owning every single thing. So some of these things we really want to influence. We want to change like how Iraq is designed. And that is a big challenge. That's not even something Shlama is near. So if you guys, if everyone here, could just keep those things in mind when you're out there advocating and doing what you're doing, and we will gladly partner with everyone and work with you to express the issues and express the obstacles so that we can continue to improve freedom and opportunities for the people there. We're at this point, and I think it's sad, but it's great at the same time, is that we have to be self-reliant.
Right.
We have to help ourselves. And another reason why this NPI initiative is so important, because it allows us to help ourselves. It is funding the local organizations, the ones that are made up of the community members, the Yazidis, and everybody, the Arabs, the Kurds, the Chaldean Assyrian Syriacs. So all of these new partner initiatives, giving the opportunities for the smaller local organizations to work within their own communities in their language, understanding their community's issues, needs, concerns, complaints, all of the little intricacies that can make it challenging, visiting the remote villages. Something else, this is the last thing, sorry, I don't know if I'm going long, but the last thing that I encourage everybody to check out is to go to shlama.org/population. And this is something we designed for all NGOs. This isn't an internal thing. This is for you. This is for everybody. We want you to see the villages that exist. There are hundreds of tiny villages that are neglected. It's like rural America. There's like not as many people, but that doesn't mean the city doesn't matter. So like usually the difference in Iraq is everybody's in the center and the farms are on the outside, whereas in America, everybody's just spaced out. But these are rural, these villages. And so that population project will allow you to see where they are, how many people live there. You might even get a little hint into the political situation just by looking at the population. So I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I love your point about redesigning Iraq. That's a very interesting expression. It kind of ties into Dr. Abouaoun's recent article, The Pope's Visit to Iraq and the Future of Christians. And he really outlines various challenges that Iraqi Christians face, whether they be security, administration of the Nineveh Plains, specifically demographic decline, conflict between the Kurdistan regional government and the Iraqi central government. Dr. Abouaoun, can you maybe hit on these points in some more detail and just introduce us to these challenges and some solutions, some proposed solutions that you have?
Yes, thank you very much. Well, I mean, most of the studies and the assessments that were done reveal that the main reason why the Christians are not returning to their areas of origin is that they lack the perception of safety and security. So the issue goes beyond infrastructure, reconstruction, employment or whatever, but there is a real issue with how safe they feel, and they don't. And obviously, this means that one of the priority things is to revisit the security arrangements in these areas. And in the article that you kindly referenced in your introduction, I did propose that the focus should be on local security forces. So forming local security units, basically hiring people from the community to serve in these local security units, and making sure that these local security units have a strong and accountable oversight mechanism. The second issue that would also contribute to this perception of safety and security is revisiting the administrative boundaries, because the existing boundaries are obsolete now. So many things happened in the last decades. And there is a need to revisit these, how these administrative boundaries are divided. and there are several technical proposals. I mean, I don't think this panel is the right place to go into much details about this issue, but there are several technical proposals, and at least one of them that I know of has been endorsed by the majority of the Christian forces in Hamdaniya. So there is, I mean, there are some ideas that could be put on the table for the government to consider, and to also discuss with the other constituents living in that area, so that, you know, the whole thing goes through an inclusive process rather than something imposed on the others. Beyond this, I think that what I suggested in the article is that there is a need to think about a kind of a Marshall Plan for the area. I know that the term itself is not fashionable anymore. It tends to be actually intimidating to some governments. So I revisited the wording, and I said that what we need to do is to identify some sort of Christian clusters, geographic clusters, and then work on twinship models between these clusters and regions or areas in the West. And obviously this will involve not only ensuring a free flow in investment or aid, but it will also require improving the governance models, which is something that is pretty much needed in Iraq. We know that the reputation in Iraq, no, it's not a reputation only, it's a fact that the level of corruption is really endemic. And what I also suggest is that given that the demographic imbalance is a fight that the Christians will not be able to win anymore, I think it's way too, I mean, it's way too unrealistic to expect that the demographic balance will be reestablished. So the only way of recreating some sort of leverage for the Christians is to make out of these clusters a poles of technology, education, and economic development. And this is how the twinship models with the other regions should be designed to ensure that the investment is focused on these aspects. And I did give the example of the Catholic University of Erbil and the Mariamna Hospital in Erbil as good examples of how this can actually happen on the ground in reality. So these are the main ideas that I laid out in the article and that I think are important to recreate conditions that would allow the Christians to stay, for those who are there, or those who are displaced to return to their areas of origin. Thank you.
All said. Thank you very much. And what we're going to do now for everyone watching is I'm going to go back to our panelists for a very quick kind of rapid fire, like 60 seconds of remarks of just what they hope they'll see from the Pope's visit. But I want to encourage people who are in the Zoom call and watching on Facebook Live that this is the time to start submitting your questions because we're about to transition over into the Q&A. So again, for our panelists, really when we look at takeaways from this visit from the Pope, what are we hoping that the international community, especially the United States, can take away from Pope Francis's visit? How can we support the mission of this visit? Again, just 60-second answers before we go into our Q&A. So I'll turn it back to Mar Awa.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, very briefly, 3 thoughts. I think that the international community should help the Iraqi government promote tolerance, brotherhood among all of the religious and ethnic components in the country. And this may be in the format of symposiums, of regular gatherings in Iraq itself, maybe hosting them in Washington, D.C. at governmental levels, but just to help them understand and to get into the spirit of promoting such dialogue with these various ethnic and religious components. Secondly, I think we can promote advocacy more locally for a greater collaboration among Iraqi groups. And thanks be to IDC for having been at the forefront of this for these last few, well, at least since 2014, I'd say.
Right.
But trying to amplify that even more and promote that here in the States. Thirdly, I think we should be able to promote more collaboration among the corresponding churches of Iraq. And so maybe IDC, and I know that the pandemic has put a damper on a lot of events that otherwise would have taken place, but maybe hosting an annual meeting of the churches that exist in Iraq, hosting them in DC by IDC itself, and having local components also of those corresponding churches to attend, and just to discuss and dialogue and sort of come out of this, step out of the Iraqi context and see what's going on even ecumenically or interchurch wise in the US and other parts of the Western world. These are just a few thoughts I had on it.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Marlo. I really appreciate that. Very thoughtful recommendations. Now let's transition over to Joe Snell.
Yeah, I think Ranna hit it a bit on the head with self-reliance and empowerment. So I think the international community needs to understand that Assyrians in the country are serious about protecting and rebuilding their own communities. We mentioned the MPU security force earlier. There are also groups on this call that are building houses, solar panels, street lamps, the mobile health clinics, fighting for recognition of the Ismaili massacre in 1933. So if one of the things that the Pope hopes to accomplish is encouraging communities on the ground, then we can support him by in turn encouraging these communities ourselves, building off that energy that the visit generates to support these initiatives. And you look at what the Assyrian Aid Society is doing, look up what Shlama is doing. I think it's important we continue this message of encouragement even after the Pope leaves the country.
Absolutely. Well said. We do have two great organizations on this webinar that we're very proud of. So Karmella, would you share? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. When an endangered animal species is noticed, actions rightfully taken, right? We have endangered ancient human ethnicity. Complacency should not be a choice right now. Assyrians having a 6,000 years old history, as it was mentioned, and first Christians, as Bishop mentioned, are oldest speaking language, being the first empire. These are people that need to be, and biblical people that need to be supported. In the book of Matthew 25:40, it says, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And that is something, a burden that should be on everybody's shoulder. What can be, we can, as my peers, Ranna mentioned, building infrastructure and being self-reliant, building all of the things we're doing are all in vain when there is no security. As Dr. Elie mentioned, security is on top of the list. All of this can be built and it can be shattered in a heartbeat, just like we saw what ISIS did. So we are relying on hoping that, as a congressman on an issue a couple of months ago, we talked to her, she mentioned resolution HR 259 has been merged with the National Defense Authorization Act.
That's right.
And
yeah,
we're hoping that that will create some sort of support for security in the region and enforcement of MPU.
Oh,
thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Karmella. No, very, very thoughtful remarks. Appreciate it. And let's switch over now to Ranna in Michigan.
So I have two things that I'm hoping that the international community and the United States will take away from the Pope's visit. The first thing, I'm a member of the Chaldean Catholic Church, and we had prayers at all of our churches worldwide for the Pope's visit. So the first thing I want people to take away is prayers or positive energy, depending on your faith, because one of the most bothersome things to people that are really working their butts off, people that are working hard every single day, is when someone comes in with just like, it's not possible, negativity, there's no chance. That stuff is just pointless to us. Like, we're still going to keep working. So positive energy and encouragement and prayers, those are really important, more than people realize. And that's what pushes us all forward. And it's like, and some people are really self-motivated and they don't need it. But that positive energy, imagine how much change we'll be able to create if we all have positive energy to make things better. And then the second thing that I want to say, and most organizations and individuals that you speak with that are actually working and active in Northern Iraq are going to keep saying the exact same thing over and over again. And we heard it on this call over and over again, and that is to support the MPU.
Right.
That is, we all recognize and we all can see the positive impact. They're peaceful, they're allies to America, they're doing everything right, and they're still not getting this significant support because of political obstacles. And so the MPU have proven themselves, and I think they deserve growth and support as much as possible. So those are the two major things that I want people to take away.
Excellent. I love it. Thank you very much, Ranna. And we'll turn it over to Dr. Abouaoun now.
Yes, well, if there's one thing that I advise that the focus should be on is diversity management. Many people focus on the recent plight of the Christians, but they tend to forget that this is something that is old, very old. It's historic, actually. And it's not exclusive to the Christians. The whole region is suffering from a lack of proper diversity management. And for the international community to step in constructively into this, they need to acknowledge one thing that is also overseen in most of the cases. It's that for centuries now, our political and electoral behavior in the region is defined by subnational identities. It doesn't mean that we're all religious. I know people who are not religious at all, but they still identify with the religious group when they discuss politics or when they go and vote. And this is a reality, whether we like it or not. This is a different discussion. The international community tried to impose on us the nation-state secular model that worked for some time in Europe, and it's not working anymore, by the way, and it failed. For 100 years, since the end of the First World War, they tried to impose this model and it failed. So it's time for the international community to wake up and to help us design a different model together with international support. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Abouaoun. That was actually a very fascinating thought that maybe we should have another conversation about at some point. I really appreciated that. We're now going to switch over to Q&A, comments, questions from our audience on Facebook, on Zoom. This will be moderated by my wonderful colleague, Sarah Basile. So I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Stephen. We actually had a number of questions that have been pretty much answered by our wonderful panelists, but there's one specific one I'd want to just get out there. I think Joe is probably best to take a look at this, but the question is regarding the Assyrian community being addressed as minorities and moving away from that as to indigenous people. What are your thoughts on that? I know that there's been some movement in that aspect, and that's a question that we've gotten several times over, so I just combined those two thoughts.
Yeah, thanks for providing that question to me, and I know some of the panelists here probably have some thoughts on this as well. In my writing, a lot of the media reporting, I'll give a media perspective on it. We still use minority, and that's certainly a discussion that I've had with editors before, and I've had it with other outlets before. But to be honest, I don't see that changing anytime soon, but maybe somebody on the panel has a better perspective on it.
Oh, okay. Ranna, did you want to give some thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I'm used to using the word indigenous minorities or minorities for a long time now. So I've been hearing about this recent language change, and I respect it. And I definitely think we should talk about it and understand it and think about it. But I do think we're in that phase of the transition. So I don't think everyone should be expected to just change instantly, but it's dialogue that we should have to show the utmost respect. So I am working on adjusting myself. I do understand the meaning. Basically, they're saying that, I guess the translation of the word diminishes our existence somehow. So I would like to learn more. I'm very open to it. I want to speak properly and to show the utmost respect to all communities. I also, somebody told me that with Yazidis, it should be Yazidis. So I want to learn these things. I think we should all just be open to learning and, and hear from those communities about, and I guess we are those communities. So we have to educate ourselves.
Well said. Thank you.
Can
Yes,
Sorry,
please.
can I interject here?
Yes,
I
of
know
course.
this discussion came, I know minorities have certain rights, but whether we like it or not, we are indigenous. Indigenous means we have a native roots. That is a term that is being used by a lot of us. We are being minoritized. That is a fact too. Otherwise, there is some discussions going on right now. You're right.
Thank you. Dr. Abouaoun, did you want to chime in and express your thoughts on this?
Not on this specific matter. I guess
Okay.
it was pretty much covered by.
Okay, all right. And I think that should wrap it up from the questions in terms of what we have.
Sarah, maybe we did Marawa want to weigh in as well?
Marawa, did you want to give in your thoughts?
Well, very briefly, I mean, so if you're living in the United States or Canada or Europe or Australia, being a minority is actually a good thing. You want to be a minority. But if you're living in the Middle East, it's not so much a good thing, because there are laws, there are legal structures in place that unfortunately don't ensure the full rights of a so-called minority. So we need to really begin moving away in our dialogue, I think, and in our expressions, away from using the word minority or aqaliya, which they use not only in Iraq, but even in Iran, it's used in a religious sense. So that will take time, obviously. That won't happen in a day or two, but to keep using that sort of a vocabulary will definitely not help empower our indigenous and Christian communities there and other so-called minorities.
Thank you. Right. Stephen, I think that should wrap up the Q&A from our end. A lot of the questions that we did have in the beginning of the session have been wonderfully answered, as I mentioned. So I appreciate everyone's comments. And if you have any questions, please feel free to message us and then we can take care of them.
Excellent. Great. What I just want to do then is, I mean, thank you for monitoring the social, Sarah, Connor, and Sophia. I just want to give each of our panelists a chance to deliver a closing statement before we conclude with the event. So I'll turn to Karmella first.
Thank you. I want to thank you for the opportunity given to us. And we're glad that Pope Francis will be traveling to Iraq and hoping he can raise our concerns. IDC has always been the forefront of voicing persecuted Christians, which is much appreciated. Preservation of such historical people should be everyone's concern. No other nation except Israel has more biblical history and prophecy associated with it than Assyrians. I'm quoting this from a friend of mine on Facebook. Thank you.
Thank you. Joe Snell.
Yeah, so I'm certainly encouraged by the visit, and I pray this visit will lead to changing of some hearts and more action on the ground. But in short, I believe that this visit also needs to be followed with action and real security and rebuilding efforts. I do have an ask of people that are still on the call now. If everybody could get on their phones and put a reminder in for July 1st, entitle it something like "Look Up Christians in Iraq." And this week we'll see a lot of messaging from state and international leaders talking about how much they care about the community. They'll give carefully prepared statements about the importance of carving out a safe space and addressing security and rebuilding efforts. So when that reminder goes off on your phone in July 1st, I simply ask you to just check back in on the community, Google it or whatever you have to do, and see what's changed, if anything's actually been done. If you have the time, even if you want some extra credit, go and check on the site at OR and see if the state has continued to keep it up and restore it. So that will be the real test for me of how effective this trip has been. I'm encouraged by the trip, and I'm certainly thankful that the Pope's making the visit. We talked about before, he's received a lot of pressure to come. I'm also realistic about what's actually going to change. So I'm encouraged, but at the same time, I'm realistic, and I'm looking forward to that change.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, you'll have to set that reminder yourself, and perhaps that'll be an article for you. Moving on now, let's hear from Ranna, Michigan.
I guess what I'm thinking about here at the end is what Representative Fortenberry said, and that was that what the Pope's visit is nothing short of miraculous. He said that an elderly man visiting during a pandemic after rockets were fired targeting the United States, and he is just very courageous to go to Iraq right now. And there's definitely hope. I think it's incredible that he was invited by Muslim leaders, and that is that's really an open arms kind of statement. So, I mean, what would be their reasoning for inviting him? So hopefully the reason is that they really want to promote peace. They want to create a better future. They want continuous religious dialogue. They're the ones that made the invitation. So maybe their plans are to continue after this. Maybe this is, I'm just hoping, I'm being positive. So hopefully, that this is just going to open a door and not just a quick visit. And we can continue this and just do really positive things and improve everything together with everybody here. Thank you for this opportunity as well, IDC.
Ranna, Dr. Abouaoun.
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned in the very beginning, I hope that this visit will allow or will create a momentum for serious discussions about some tangible issues, because this is what is really needed on the ground, beyond the message of hope and courage. And the second thing is to highlight that the plight of the Christians and the minorities in general in the region is not only the result of political factors, but there are social factors as well. So the problem is political and social at the same time. And most of the interventions so far have underestimated the importance of the social factors. Our own social values do not help to have an inclusive diversity management. If we want to really solve the problem, we need to work at the political level, as we mentioned before, but also at the social level. So hopefully this will also be taken into account. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abouaoun, and thank you for your work at USIP on these issues. And I wanted to invite Mar Awa to deliver some closing thoughts.
Thank you very much, Stephen. It's been a joy being with all of you, and I think a lot of wonderful ideas and thoughts were expressed. First and foremost, I think we ought to pray for the Pope's visit, for the Pope personally, for his health and for his safety during this very important and historic visit to Iraq, the cradle of civilization. As I mentioned, it's been a visit that has taken 21 years to bring about and to actualize, but thanks be to God that it did take place. And my hope is that the discussions that do take place there will be continued even after the Pope's departure, and that there will be frank discussions among the local and ethnic and religious components of the country on the ground. And I hope that this will be an impetus for that. And we can always hope and always pray. And I think that's important to keep an open mind.
Thank you very much, Mar Awa. I just want to thank all of you as a panel. You all come from while you all share in many senses a heritage and faith, you all come from pretty diverse backgrounds in terms of vocation, what you're called to do, whether that's religious life, journalism, international development, policy research. And I think that you all provided some excellent perspectives for today's conversation. We'd love to work with you all again in the future. I want to actually thank as well Sarah, my colleague Sarah Basile, Connor Jones, Sophia Bistekis for all their help behind the scenes and making this happen. We have a great team at IDC, and it's a pleasure to work with them every day. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. You can share this video on Facebook. It's also going to be uploaded to YouTube. You can share that link online with your friends, with your families, with your churches. We do these webinars about once a month or twice a month at IDC. So to learn more, to keep updated with our work, you can visit indefenseofchristians.org. So we're grateful to everyone. We hope that you all have a great day and join us in praying for the Pope's visit and also acting in response to it and showing our brothers and sisters in Iraq that they are not forgotten or alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.